They thought firing me would be the end of the story. What they didn't know was that I had already written the final chapter months ago. My name is Marin Holloway, and for 18 years, I was the quiet force behind Carrian Technologies' most critical systems. I built the infrastructure they all depended on. But when the new CEO arrived, he decided I didn't belong in the picture anymore. So on a Monday morning, in front of the entire executive team, he made his move. Monday morning started like any other until it didn't. At 9:40 a.m., I stepped into the executive conference room carrying my notes and an annotated system audit that had taken all weekend to prepare. I wasn't expecting applause, but I certainly wasn't expecting ambush either. Philip Crane, the newly appointed CEO, sat at the head of the table like a king holding court. His tie was sharp, his smile sharper. The rest of the leadership team was already seated, including Savannah, my former mentee, someone I once stayed up late training back when she didn't know how to launch a test environment. Marin, Philip said, folding his hands like he was hosting a game show. Let's keep this short. I froze mid-step, notebook still clutched in one hand. He didn't let the silence breathe. As of this moment, your role at Carrian Technologies is being dissolved, effective immediately. Gasps didn't erupt. No one screamed. Instead, the air thinned into something suffocating. Tight, silent, paralyzing. Eyes dropped to desks. Pens tapped nervously. No one moved to object, not even Savannah. I scanned the room, searching for someone, anyone, with the decency to look me in the eye. No one did. Philip slid a sealed envelope across the glass table toward me like it was a check at a dinner party. You'll find your severance outlined here. HR will assist you with your exit logistics by noon. I didn't sit. I didn't touch the envelope. My pulse was steady. Too steady. Because this wasn't a surprise. This exact date, this exact time, 9:40 a.m. on a Monday, had been programmed into Sentinel's contingency trigger months ago, when I first noticed leadership changes coming. If my credentials were revoked under hostile conditions, Sentinel would begin a silent lockdown, freezing Carrian's back-end system, layer by layer. They didn't know that. They thought they were terminating a job title. I calmly stepped forward, placed my badge on the center of the table, and looked Philip directly in the eye. That smug little curl on his lip didn't even flicker. Understood, I said simply. Then I turned past Savannah's downcast face, past the people who once cheered my system launch, and walked out of the room without a sound. Only when the door closed behind me did the smile start to form. Not the kind born of happiness, but the kind born of certainty. The countdown had just begun as I stepped into the elevator that Monday morning. Just minutes after my public dismissal, I didn't break down. I didn't rush for the parking lot or call a lawyer. I simply tapped the button for the ground floor, held my breath for a count of 3, and exhaled. Because this wasn't panic, this was protocol. The ride down gave me time to think, though. I didn't need much. The plan had already been put in motion the moment Philip Crane signed my termination order. What no one in that building realized was that I wasn't just another employee. Years ago, before Carrian Technologies became a rising name in enterprise logistics, it was a dying startup on the edge of bankruptcy. The infrastructure was a mess. Systems overlapping, data leaking, vendors pulling out. I was brought in on a contract basis to stabilize the chaos. What I did was more than that. I designed and deployed an internal relay system. One that could sit quietly between every key transaction, redirecting, validating, and securing data across departments without drawing attention. I called it Sentinel. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with a pitch deck or a product launch. It was just a smart silent layer that did what everyone else forgot. It held the whole thing together. Over time, the company recovered. New deals came in. Investors started calling. The infrastructure became bulletproof. They said, what no one realized was that Sentinel didn't live on Carrian servers. When I built it, I saw too much internal instability, political infighting, short-term leadership. So, I didn't embed Sentinel directly into Carrian's core system. Instead, I spun up a secure external server cluster registered under my own LLC, buried beneath routine hosting metadata. Sentinel was deployed through that channel, like a clean bypass cable only I knew existed. Legally, I retained ownership. Technically, I maintained full control. They used it every day. They just never understood it was never theirs. No one questioned it because I made sure Sentinel did one thing better than anything else. Never fail, so long as it worked. They didn't care how After I was promoted to lead systems architect, I kept Sentinel out of documentation. It became the invisible spine of our operations. Even Savannah, who once shadowed me for 6 months, never asked about the Ghost protocol, alerts that only I received. And when Philip Crane joined as CEO, I knew. I saw the signs, the language of cost-cutting, the hunger for control. That's when I coded in the contingency trigger, a silent command. If my credentials are terminated without Sentinel reauthorization, the system begins a gradual shutdown, not all at once, not violently, just enough to break everything. So, no, I wasn't afraid when Philip smiled at me across the conference table because he thought he was erasing an old name from the org chart. He didn't know he was disconnecting Carrian from its spine. As the elevator dinged open, I walked calmly through the lobby, past the receptionist, who didn't even look up. I stepped into the sunlight, crisp and cold, and pulled out my phone. Not to call anyone, just to check the Sentinel activity log. It had begun. 2 days after my dismissal, I received a formal transition notice from HR. It didn't say I was being fired. Not exactly. It was dressed up in sanitized corporate language. Effective immediately, your position is being redefined as a temporary technical advisor under the CTO's oversight. No office, no team, no direct reports. Just a shared desk in a forgotten corner of the second floor with no nameplate and no wired connection. My badge still worked, but only on select floors, and the email system had stripped my title down to consultant infrastructure temporary. It was clear I wasn't being transitioned. I was being erased. Meanwhile, Philip was busy painting a new version of Carrian, one filled with buzzwords, soft launch posters, and a team that looked like it was cast from a startup fashion catalog. I met them that week during a company-wide town hall. Philip introduced his new tech visionaries, a hand-picked squad of bright-eyed, fresh-faced talent pulled mostly from his old firm. They all dressed in neutral tones and said things like cross-functional innovation and next-gen workflows with an uncomfortable level of confidence. To the board, they looked fresh, disruptive, clean. To me, they looked like a bad investment waiting to implode. One of them, a guy named Trey, couldn't have been more than 28. Slick haircut, perfect teeth, and a smartwatch that he kept tapping, like it gave him purpose. On the third day, I found him in the server staging room holding a tablet and looking confused. "Hey, you're Marin, right?" he asked. I nodded. Double quotes. Cool. Quick question. This directory tree here. He turned the tablet toward me. Is it safe to archive this whole cluster? It's not labeled and hasn't been touched in like 8 months. My stomach turned. It was Sentinel's decoy structure, an intentionally inert layer meant to misdirect anyone poking too deep. Deleting it wouldn't break the system, but it would trigger Sentinel's auto-preservation protocols. You shouldn't touch that, I said calmly. It's tied to some legacy workflows. Trey smiled in that dismissive way only the young and unproven know how to wear. No worries. Already queued it for deletion. Gotta clean out the cobwebs, right? I didn't argue. I just walked away. What he didn't know, and what no one in Philip's army of Instagram-ready engineers knew, was that Sentinel had been trained for moments like this. When it detected a deletion request without matching credentials or origin authorization, it automatically cloned the affected structure to a shadow drive, masked the original behind a decoy layer, and rewrote the access log to read as action completed to Trey and the internal dashboard. His command succeeded. In reality, Sentinel had saved the company from a catastrophic breach of its own operational backbone, and no one even knew. Not Philip, not Trey, not Savannah. Especially not Savannah. She had gone from mentee to middle manager in less than a year, now overseeing strategic systems transition. She no longer made eye contact with me in the hallway when she did pass by. Her smile was thin, polite but performative. I had trained her, fed her confidence when she doubted herself, taught her how to navigate misaligned documentation and legacy code. And now she stood shoulder to shoulder with the people replacing me, as if I had never existed. They weren't just replacing talent with trendiness. They were replacing history with style. Still, I didn't protest, didn't complain. Let them talk about digital transformation and product-market synergy. Let them gut the system from the outside in. Because for now, Sentinel still held the line, and I still held Sentinel. The illusion was theirs. But the architecture, that was still mine. The thought lingered with me as I walked into the demo hall on Thursday morning. The whole floor had been rearranged. Folding chairs formed neat rows in front of the main screen. Branded slides rotated on a projector labeled Innovation Sprint. Rethinking the backbone. I recognized the phrase. It had been copy-pasted from one of my old infrastructure overviews. Except now it was being used to dismantle the very thing it once described. Philip's team had invited everyone from engineering, ops, and even marketing to the event. I hadn't been formally asked. But my calendar pinged with a blanket all-staff welcome invite, and someone from HR mumbled something about technical presence optics. I took a seat near the back, in the far right corner. Quiet, removed, unnoticed. No nameplate. No introduction. No welcome back. Savannah took the stage alongside Trey. Both of them dressed like they just stepped off a TED Talk set. Savannah wore a silk blouse and the kind of smile I used to trust. Trey had a remote in one hand and confidence in the other. Today, we're going to show you where Carrian Technologies is headed, Savannah began. A system that's lighter, faster, and built for scale. We're leaving behind outdated legacy protocols and ushering in a new digital era. I watched silently as they walked through a UI shell I recognized all too well. It was a new coat of paint, nothing more. The routing logic, still Sentinel. The security sequences, still Sentinel. They didn't even realize the data in their demo was being silently filtered and validated by the very system they were pretending didn't exist. Then it happened. Trey pulled up a config panel and misused a key term. He called a subnetter floating token distributor, which made absolutely no technical sense. I couldn't help it. I raised a hand just slightly. Not to embarrass, not to interrupt, just to clarify. I didn't even speak. Savannah saw me. She paused, then forced a smile. That didn't reach her eyes. My apologies, she said into the mic, voice perfectly modulated for civility. We appreciate you being here, but since you're no longer part of the active team, let's give the floor to the current architects. A few heads turned. Most didn't. The silence that followed wasn't loud. It was empty, like a roomful of people, all pretending not to notice a small, cruel thing happening in real time. I nodded once, no anger, no comment. I stood up and walked to the back, letting the door click shut behind me as I stepped into the hallway. The walls were quiet. Carpet muted my footsteps. I didn't look back. I made my way to the coffee machine by the corner lounge. It sputtered quietly as it filled a paper cup. I sat on the worn gray bench nearby, still holding it, untouched. That was when I noticed the intern, Jaime, one of the new hires from admin, was lingering by the hallway, phone in hand, expression frozen in awkward realization. He had recorded the demo on his phone, as interns often do. What he hadn't expected was to capture that moment MIB being asked to leave. The room's reaction, or lack of one. We made eye contact. He flushed, lowered the phone, and walked quickly away. By that afternoon, the video had made its way through a few Slack channels. I overheard it referenced near the elevators. Did you see what happened to Marin? Someone whispered. They just shut her down mid-meeting, but no one said anything. To me, no apology, no message, no you okay. Just corporate silence. Clean, chilled, impenetrable. I finished my coffee slowly, eyes fixed on the floor. My badge still worked. My system access, though limited, still allowed me to view Sentinel's logs. I tapped into the admin monitor from my phone. 1. Unauthorized protocol rename attempt. 2. Failed credential pings. 1. Auto restore complete. Sentinel operational. I closed the tab and sat still for another moment, letting the humiliation settle. Not as defeat, but as data. They had cut me out of the presentation, but they were still standing on the system I built. And they didn't even know it. No one looked me in the eye as I walked out of the demo. No one followed, not even Savannah. That silence stayed with me as I drove home in the dark. Headlights catching street signs I'd passed for years. The office lights had dimmed behind me, but the humiliation hadn't. It sat in the back seat, like a passenger I couldn't shake. When I entered my apartment, I didn't bother turning on the lights. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and headed straight to my desk. The room was still. Only the low hum of the air purifier reminded me I wasn't completely underwater. I opened my laptop, the familiar glow spilling onto my face. My fingers moved on instinct. New email. Subject, formal resignation. Effective immediately. I stared at the blank body of the message for a while, then began typing. I am submitting my resignation from Carrian Technologies, effective immediately. I am grateful for the opportunities provided, and wish the current team continued success. It sounded sterile, professional, Exactly what they expected. But halfway through the paragraph, I stopped. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I reread every line. Then I hit backspace and deleted it all. I didn't know if I wanted to quit or if I just wanted it all to stop hurting. On impulse, I opened the Sentinel admin console. The terminal loaded slowly, the command bar blinking with familiarity. I'd built this console to be private, responsive, and irreversible. One line. That's all it would take to wipe Sentinel from their infrastructure. I could erase it. Every strand of code, every log entry, every silent process running beneath their glossy dashboards. No more safety net. No more invisible shield. But my hands refused to move. If I did it, people would suffer. Not just Philip or Savannah, but clients, tech support, partners, the people who actually relied on this infrastructure to protect what they'd built. People like I used to be. I leaned back, stared at the ceiling, and heard my father's voice. In my head, if they don't see you, make sure they feel you in the results. And yet, I had to wonder, how long was I willing to be unseen? I returned to the terminal. My cursor blinked over the same half-typed command. I cleared the line, closed the window, and opened the logs instead. That's when I saw it. Alert, unauthorized access attempt. 8:14 p.m., origin unregistered device, internal network, Carrian HQ. I clicked into the detailed log. Someone had attempted a root restructure request on Sentinel. That was no routine maintenance call. That was a power grab. Sentinel had blocked it immediately as programmed. But the request had been disguised behind a spoofed IP. Sloppy, lazy, but ambitious. I traced the headers manually. It took 30 seconds less. Really, Sentinel always kept clean records. No matter how hard someone tried to hide, the source, S.M. Mercer, at carriantech.com, Savannah, my jaw clenched, but I didn't move. I didn't curse, I didn't even blink, just stared at the name. She hadn't, just stepped into my old seat. She was trying to rewrite the system under her name. 3 years ago, I'd gone to bat for her after she accidentally redirected a client's financials to an unsecured server. I took the blame. I cleaned it up. And now she was trying to take everything I'd built silently, strategically, like I'd never existed. I didn't send the resignation. I didn't send a warning either. Instead, I opened a secondary terminal and typed in a new command. Activate watch mode. Trace unauthorized access log in Shadow Channel Sentinel. The confirmation, blinked back. Monitoring initiated. I closed my laptop, let the silence return. This time it didn't feel empty. It felt loaded. The morning after I activated watch mode, an email from HR landed in my inbox at 8:15 a.m. sharp. No greeting, no context, just a cold directive. Please schedule a time this week to retrieve your personal belongings. A security escort will be provided, as per offboarding protocol. It hit harder than I expected, not because I didn't see it coming, but because it was so impersonal. 18 years, and I was reduced to a line in a corporate checklist. Still, I replied with a single sentence and chose the earliest slot available. I needed to close the loop, not for them, for me. When I arrived at Carrian HQ later that afternoon, the lobby lights felt brighter than usual, like the building itself was overcompensating. The receptionist didn't even glance up. I gave my name. Moments later, a young man in a navy blazer approached. Ms. Holloway. I'm Dylan from security. I'll walk you up. We stepped into the elevator. Neither of us spoke. I could see his reflection in the brushed steel wall. Awkward, polite, maybe even apologetic. I didn't break the silence. The third floor looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I just stopped seeing it as home. Most of the cubicles had been rearranged. A sleek touchscreen display now hung where the project roadmap whiteboard used to be. My old office had a different name on the door. The blinds were half closed. My things had been packed into a medium-sized cardboard box and left on the side desk like an afterthought. No one was waiting for me. No one said hello. I walked in slowly. Dylan stayed at the door. Inside the box were the usual remnants. My ceramic mug with the blue skyline print. A couple of notebooks. An old photo of my dad and me at my college graduation, and a flash drive keychain I hadn't seen in years. I took my time checking drawers even though I knew they were supposed to be empty. The top ones held nothing but dust and a single bent paperclip. But the bottom drawer, slightly jammed, caught my attention. I tugged it open with both hands. Something had slid behind the drawer panel, a yellow folder, warped at the edges, thick with papers. I pulled it out. Inside were diagrams. My diagrams. The original Sentinel architecture, hand-sketched on engineering vellum. Page after page of structure, node mapping, redundancy layers, biometric logic, access hierarchy. In the corner of the first page, faint but unmistakable, was my signature. M. Holloway, April 17, 2016. I stared at it. A part of me wanted to laugh. They'd tried to erase me from the company, tried to replace me, overwrite me, ignore the foundations I built. But here it was, the system they depended on, drawn in ink, born from my mind, signed and dated years before. New tech visionaries was even a phrase. This wasn't nostalgia, this was evidence. I tucked the folder carefully at the bottom of the box, beneath the mug and framed photo. Dylan shifted at the door, but still said nothing. I nodded to him when I was ready. We walked back through the hall, past people who once called me their tech oracle, and now couldn't make eye contact. I didn't blame them. This place had a way of encouraging silence. The elevator ride down was quiet. At the lobby, Dylan finally spoke. "Take care, Ms. Holloway." I nodded again. "You too." As I stepped outside, a gust of cold air met my face for the first time in weeks. I didn't feel numb. I felt aware of the weight in the box I carried and the power it represented. They thought they were escorting me out like a leftover, but I walked away holding the one thing they could never recreate. And now I had the proof. I didn't look back as the glass doors closed behind me. Carrian Technologies was now just a shape in the rear view, but I didn't need to turn around because what was coming was already in motion. As I walked across the parking lot, carrying the last remnants of 18 years in a cardboard box, my phone buzzed softly in my coat pocket. I paused beside my car, shielding the screen from the wind. Sentinel log notification status. Inactive admin protocol detected. Countdown initiated. 3 hours remaining. No sirens, no flashing lights, just a quiet signal. I didn't trigger it. I didn't have to. Sentinel was always watching, and it knew the difference between an exit and an exile. By the time I got home, the sky was turning lavender. My apartment was still. The air carried that early winter crispness that made the walls echo more than usual. I placed the box on the table, slid my laptop out from the drawer, and powered it on. A familiar hum greeted me as I logged into my private Sentinel console. The version buried behind layers of obfuscation and accessible only through a device I had physically registered 5 years ago. No backdoors, no loopholes, just one clean connection. The dashboard appeared. Phase 1 scheduled. Access layer disruption. 2 hours 47 minutes and 36 seconds remaining. Everything looked normal. System operation stable. No alerts, but the code was already unfurling in the background. I leaned back in my chair, sipping lukewarm tea from the mug I'd brought home, the one with the Carrian logo slightly chipped on the handle. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. Sentinel wasn't built to crash the company. It was built to prove one thing, that they never controlled it. From the menu bar, I selected the hidden option labeled Override Protocols, and entered a multi-phase command. Initiate layered freeze protocol. Confirm yes. This wasn't a shutdown. It was a quiet suffocation.